I know many of us spend so much time looking for the perfect way to run a discovery call. The script. What questions should I ask? How do I handle objections? How do I close the call? But honestly, having been on a couple of really disappointing calls myself as a potential client, I'm going to tell you right now, you don't need a better script. You need to do one thing that so many people overlook, and it costs them the business every time. Too often, the difference between getting the client and them walking away is one simple thing. And I'm going to teach it to you in today's episode. Let's do this. Welcome to the Establish Yourself podcast, the show that helps coaches and consultants get clear on how to talk about what you do, simplify your offers, and have more fun in your business and beyond. I'm Annie Franceschi, brand strategist, author, former Disney storyteller, and forever Muppet fan. I'm here to help you clarify your message, package your expertise, and streamline your systems to grow a business you actually enjoy. If you're ready for less confusion and more magic, it's time to establish yourself. If you've ever wondered why a promising discovery call didn't turn into a yes, it may not be your offer or your pricing or your experience. It may be that the other person on the other side didn't feel fully understood. I was recently on the other side of a few calls, and they reminded me how quickly trust can break down when someone skips this one simple step. And today's episode is really about helping you avoid this because in both cases, it left me with a not great impression of the person I was working with and could have cost them the business. And in one case, almost did. Often I am the person hosting a free 20-minute free consultation. But in these cases, I was actually reaching out. So I'm going to tell you two different stories. The first is I was actually looking to hire someone in my personal life. So I was reaching out to a consultant, and I was doing that because I was really frustrated with the person I had been working with. And I'd been putting off for so long replacing them. And I sort of had my thoughts together as to what I needed. And I went to this new person, we'll call her Cheryl. I reached out to Cheryl and said sort of what I was struggling with and what was going on and what the past situation had been in our 20-minute call. And unfortunately, instead of kind of sharing that back with me and speaking to what I specifically raised, they used the opportunity to spend about 20 minutes of our call. So we're bumping up against our whole time together on their origin story as to how they got into what they did, down to like the minutia detail of exactly the origin story of how they became passionate about the work they do now. And to the point, like I'm having this call as I'm driving to go pick up my son. I'm like, wow, I'm gonna have to hop off this call before I can even like ask a question because I'm getting like the back and forth detail of an origin story that probably should have been maybe a sentence or two. Right? And so my takeaway was like, oh, this was like, I was such an easy slam dunk. All this person had to do was recognize my situation and help speak to it. And instead, they thought they had to like prove themselves, right? And had to tell me their whole life story, especially their like kind of work origin story. And I was like, ooh, wow. And I hung up the call basically being like, I am not super confident this is going to be the right person for me. Another example of this came up recently where I had hired a consultant, someone I had heard on a podcast and was inspired by and wanted to ask them some questions. I had put a lot of work into preparing for the call and sending them like a one pager of information. We get into that session and we're talking, and they got it and they misinterpreted something. And rather than like clarify or listen to me when I would say, actually, that's not really what my situation is, it's this, they were just really stuck on whatever their assumption was and continued to give me advice from a place that wasn't relevant to me. So, all that to say, both of those experiences were extremely frustrating. And there was one simple thing that both of these people could have done to make themselves incredible partners to me, to make it a slam dunk yes to working with that consultant, to make me feel like I was being coached and mentored by the other. And here was the difference maker. It is a two-word phrase: reflective listening. It simply means pausing before you advise, diagnose, or pitch, and saying back what you heard. What was missing from both of these conversations that I want you to incorporate in your next call, whether that's a free consultation or even in one of your coaching sessions, this is a process by which You spend the first part of the call better understanding the person in front of you, asking questions, getting a clear understanding. And here is the practice: reflecting that understanding back to them. Do not proceed without doing that. That is why the first consultant almost lost my business. I actually ended up working with her, but almost kind of reluctantly because I needed to, not because I really felt like, wow, this person gets me. The thing that she could have done better was to say, "Hey, I hear that you had these frustrations, etc., and that's why you're thinking of hiring someone. Is that right?" And then spoke into that and say, "Well, I do these things specifically differently." She should have matched to what I was talking about, right? That is a better conversation where I feel really listened to and heard. And the whole purpose, I think we forget sometimes, of calls like these is to feel out fit. And does the person across from me really understand what my problems are? So the simplest, best thing they could have done is just said to me, like, "Hey, I've heard you say X, Y, and Z, and that's what caused your frustration. Is that right?" So, by the same account, with when you're working and coaching and guiding your clients, same thing. That could have saved the other conversation I had if he had stopped at the beginning, asked a few couple questions. "Hey, I read everything you said. Here's what I think you're saying. Is that right?" And I'd say yes or no and be able to clarify, and then proceeding with that. This was a person who I think could grow a lot in their mentoring skills, because not only that happened, but then once I had to correct him multiple times, he still kept holding on to that frame. So the biggest thing here is that I know that early on in my business, I used to feel all this pressure to like prove myself and share my impressive story and gain people's trust. But what really builds trust with people is your ability to listen to them. It is your ability to deeply understand their problems and point them to what the solutions are. The point of any of these calls is not to impress people. If they're talking to you, they trust you to some extent. They're interested in working with you. It's not about proving yourself in that way. Where you really build the know, like, and trust is doing what so few people do, is this reflective listening. And that's why I say, like, it is something you don't have to write down when you listen to this episode. Here's the mantra you can use for your next discovery call: what I'm hearing is X, Y, or Z. Did I get that right? They'll say yes or they'll say no. They'll help correct the record. And when you have that clear understanding, you're just going to match them to what you have. If they are a match for what you do, great. You say, "Hey, I heard you say this, that, and the third. What I do really solves that problem. Great. Let me share a little bit with you about that. If you're not a fit, you can make a great referral." That's all this is. You don't need a fancy script. And if you want more guidance around this, I actually have an entire episode around what I call the feel good discovery call. It's episode 45. I'll put a link here in the show notes so you can go check it out. But this is a really good start. So if you take nothing away from today, what I want you to remember is reflective listening. Try saying, "What I'm hearing is this. Did I get that right?" That one question can completely change the energy and the ending of your discovery call. You're going to build trust. And what's most important is you're going to be able to provide the value that we both know you can bring. In the case of the person who I ended up working with, they've been great. I really enjoyed working with them. And I'm really glad that the not so great discovery call didn't mean that we didn't work together, but it almost did. And I want to save you from that potential trap. Too many of us fall into it. We think there's not a lot of value necessarily in spending this time recapping the call, but that's the most valuable time you can spend in these conversations, is to reflect back what you heard. Because when people feel like you understand them and that whatever you're offering is the right next step, you've built trust. You've made a connection and you've shown that you are worthy of the next step, which is being invested in. You and I both know you are. So, put this in your toolbox, write it down, put it on a post it note. Reflective listening. What I'm hearing is, did I get that right? You've got this. If you liked what I was saying in this episode, I have that whole other episode called the Feel Good Discovery Call. I'll link to that in the show notes. But if you love getting tips like this, I would encourage you to head on over to greateststorycreative.com/pod links, PODLINKS, And that will give you a way to actually sign up to get new episodes of the show emailed right to you. So you don't have to keep up with, oh, is there something new out? You will literally get an email every single time that something comes out, along with great tips and resources. Like I just did a free branding checklist just the other week tied to an episode. So I'll put a link in the show notes. But if you love today's episode and want more of it and don't want to have to think, you just want me to show up in your inbox and let you know something's new, I will do that for you because you're so great. And I'm happy to do that for you. Head on over to greateststorycreative.com/podlinks to hop on the list. Hey, do you like surprises? The credits are about to roll, but just like a Marvel movie, stick around to the end for something I put in just for you. Thanks for listening to the Establish Yourself podcast. I'm Annie Franceschi, and if you're enjoying the show, it would mean so much to me if you follow it, leave a quick rating, or share it with a friend. And for free branding resources and more ways to work together, head to greateststorycreative.com/podcast. Now here it is, your moment of magic. Hey, I just discovered this, and maybe I'm late to the party, but on my iPhone, there is an app called Shortcuts, and you can set up custom automations. So, for example, you can do things like every time I leave the house, remind me to grab my water bottle or whatever, because your phone can be set up to know like when you're leaving the house or when you're arriving at work. I like to do a daily gratitude journal practice, and I do this at 3 o'clock where I have like an alarm go off, and I set up an automation that at 3:01 my phone will create a new note in the Notes app and even give it a title and put it in the right folder and open it on my phone so I can just start typing to write down my gratitude practice. Isn't that crazy? I'm like really excited about this. So if I'm late to the party and you've got a cool automation, let me know. But I did not know this, that your phone can do this and it can do all kinds of really cool automations you can set up and little shortcuts you can set up on your phone. So if you use that, awesome. If you don't, go down the rabbit hole with me. It's going to be so great.